Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics. Thank you for joining us this week. Today, we have an amazing guest. Today, we have Cullen Bunn. He is writer and creator extraordinaire. He has written for almost everyone: Marvel, DC, IDW, Image Comics, Dark Horse. And we're speaking to him today specifically about Red Zone by AWA. But he has written all kinds of stuff. He has a lot of amazing new things out right now. Check it out. We cover his entire career that spans over a decade, from all of the different collaborators that he's worked with, including Marvel, DC, and all of the other ones that I mentioned. We talk about XMen, we talk about Deadpool, but specifically, we're talking about Red Zone today. If you haven't read Red Zone, you need to check it out. It's an amazing comic, it's an amazing action thriller. Action nonstop throughout all three issues. Issue 4 comes out in about 2 weeks. So get into your local comic book store and ask them to ensure that they are ordering Red Zone so you can pick it up. You will not be disappointed. One of my favorite reads of the year. All right, without further ado, here is Cullen and I. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. We got the one and the only Cullen Bunn. Cullen, how are you? Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for jumping on.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've read a few articles of other interviews that you have done, and I think rightly so. You are named kind of horror king or thriller king. I don't know if you have been told that, but man, you are you are an expert when it comes to thriller episodes. It's quite amazing, and you got a lot going on. I don't know how you write so much and so diverse of stories. It's pretty incredible.
One page at a time.
Is that
That's
right?
the way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So I believe you're doing this full time for the last 5 years or so.
Well, actually, more like last 12 or so years. I've been full time comic writer for a while now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you would have to be able to pump out what you're pumping out because it's pretty incredible.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yep. So I wanted to jump in. This is a little bit funny. I did kind of pick this up in one of your interviews, but can you share a little bit about X Laser Knight?
Yeah, no, I can. I mean, this is how far back it goes for me in comics.
Yeah,
Comics have been part of my life, pretty much all my life.
yeah.
And yeah, when I was in fourth and fifth grade, my friends and I formed a team called the X Laser Knights,
That's awesome.
and it was we were the X Laser Knights. It was laser with a Z because that's the cooler way to spell laser.
Of course.
And yeah, we had a team, and all during fifth grade, every week I wrote and drew a comic featuring all my friends as the characters, and we went on, crazy space adventures.
That's awesome.
And my dad had a photocopier at work, so I put that to use, and it was these 6 or 8 page comics that I did every week, and I gave to everyone in my class once a week. I would give them a copy of this comic, and sadly, I do not have any of those anymore. I
No
can remember
way.
them vividly, but I don't have any, and I don't think any of my former class. I don't think my former classmates saw the collectability of them, and they just pitched them
Oh,
right out the door.
that's gotta hurt a little bit.
Well, it's all right.
Yeah.
It taught me a lesson early on about
Yeah.
about comics.
Well, it also shows your passion from the very beginning around comic books, which is really cool. What was the first comic book that you really got into and you couldn't miss an issue of? Do you remember?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember reading issues of X-Men
Hmm.
when I used to get comics at garage sales.
Yeah,
So, it was, who knows what issues I was getting and where I was getting them from. But my dad would go to a garage sale and he'd bring me a box of comics or a grocery sack full of comics.
that's
I
awesome.
remember reading X-Men when they were still in the blue and gold uniforms. That's probably the earliest comic I remember reading. I remember reading an issue of Avengers where they fought Atuma, and I thought for sure that Atuma had killed the Avengers in that issue. I think it was 152, 150 something, and that terrified me right off the bat. But I picked up an issue of Micronauts #7
Mm.
at the grocery store that was in the same shopping center where my dad's office was. And I sat in the back room of my dad's office, and I must have read that issue two dozen times sitting back in that office or in that back room. And that was the comic that I think made me love comics, because it had such a there was so much world building going on in those pages, and I recognized that this is a very young age, and I was like, this guy's doing something. He's not just telling a story about toys.
Yeah.
He's building this giant universe.
Yeah.
And it just that was so Micronauts was the comic that made me just fall head over heels for comics.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, it must have been pretty crazy to also write for Marvel after having some of that impact on you as a young child reading X-Men and other. I mean, what was that feeling like, getting the chance to actually write a comic book that might have had an impact on you becoming a writer in the first place?
Yeah, no, I loved working for Marvel. You're right. I got to, if you'd have asked me, when I was in my 20s, if I would ever write Uncanny X-Men, which was the comic my dad and I collected together. He wasn't into comics, but he loved collecting comics. He loved buying issues. So we collected Uncanny X-Men and built a run, and then I sold them to pay for college.
Yeah.
But that, if you'd have asked me in my 20s if I was ever going to write Uncanny X-Men, I said, no, no way, no way. And if you'd have asked me 6 months before I wrote Uncanny X-Men if I was ever going to write Uncanny X-Men, I said, oh no, no way. So yeah, it was really it was sort of a humbling experience. It was exciting. I mean, when we were developing that series, for instance, there was a moment where they're like, well, maybe we change the titles. Maybe it's not Uncanny X-Men. I was like, listen, I'm writing Uncanny X-Men. That's the one I'm writing. Because I did that because, I really wanted to do it because of the memories that my dad and I had about the book. And yeah, it's just it was a big deal to me because, I didn't write those characters for a quick buck.
Right.
I wrote those characters because, like you, I love those characters.
Yeah.
And even the characters I didn't love, a lot of them I came to, sort of embrace, and I love those characters now.
Yeah.
If you'd asked me before, I would have said, no, those aren't favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I could tell you, as a reader of comics, you could kind of tell when a writer really enjoys the characters that they're writing for, and you could tell when they don't. And so I think that's amazing to be a fan of it and then to come in and write it. I think as a fan of that comic, you could really tell the difference, and I'm sure a lot of fans appreciated that. What about horror? I mean, you literally are being called the king of horror or thriller. When did that start? Because that's a little different than X-Men and some of the other stuff. Was there a comic that had some kind of an impact where you're like, wow, I really love this type of comic book?
Well, again, even from a young age, I was reading those great anthology comics like House of Mystery, or
Yeah.
Charlton Comics put out so many amazing horror comics. They just put out these great books. So I was reading those anthologies. I was reading eerie and creepy. I was really into those. But and I still have this somewhere. I remember drawing, like, I created my own haunted house, like the House of Mystery, that this would be where people would tell, ghost stories, and I drew all these monsters that lived in it. But I never, that wasn't my, I didn't see myself as a horror guy, right? For years and years and years. It wasn't, I liked those stories. I liked getting, spooked out, but I wasn't a horror guy. When I first decided I wanted to really pursue writing as a career, was right after, late high school. And I had gotten into horror movies at that point, and I had really because I wanted to do special effects makeup.
Okay. Yeah.
And that didn't happen. And I shifted goals to writing, but I had been so sort of into the horror genre for a while. I started writing. I didn't know how to get into comics. All I was doing was getting form rejection letter after form rejection letter. So I started doing short stories, and I was submitting to horror magazines because I knew how to do that. And that really got me into it. And it really expanded my view of the genre because I was reading so much of it and trying to tell different kinds of stories. And it just kind of stuck with me. And my first couple of things that I did in comics, I wouldn't say were horror books.
Mm-hmm.
The Damned was my first thing, and it was it had horror elements. It was
Right.
a noir story with demons.
Mm-hmm.
And Sixth Gun is more of a fantasy, but it definitely had horror elements. And
Sure.
it's kind of built, it built from there, built from there. Harrow County was much more of a horror book. And
Yeah.
it just became it's definitely. And at one time I was kind of like, I don't want to be the horror guy. I don't want people to think of me as the horror writer. And then at some point I was like, you know what? I don't care. I want them to think of me as the horror writer. I can at least I can do some branding towards that. If that's the case,
Yeah.
if you want to see me as the horror guy, I'll just brand towards being the horror guy. And so I embraced it at some point. Um, and I do, I like doing other things, but I think I will always have, a horror book
Yeah.
or two in rotation, just because it's, I think there's so much you can do with the genre. There's
Yeah.
so much the genre is so much more than a lot of people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, when I was working, getting into, when I was doing short stories and things like that, and I was attending the World Horror Convention on a regular basis, the horror community is just so freaking welcoming
Yeah.
and so kind.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to be at least, at least somewhere in that community.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the community's definitely embraced you. And obviously, after reading Red Zone and obviously Uncanny and Captain America, I mean, there's so many other things that you've done outside of horror. You're very good at horror, but you're also very diverse in your ability to write a lot of different things. And man, Red Zone, I don't know if you call it a thriller, but man, the excitement and the heart pounding toward the end of the issues, and then the kind of depression that sets in because it ends at a spot where you got to wait for that next issue. I mean, it's exactly how I think this type of a book should go. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun to read. I think you got 1 through 3, and then issue 4 is on its way. But maybe tell us a little bit about Red Zone and what are your thoughts about this story?
Yeah, Red Zone is definitely a bit of a departure for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's an action thriller. I
Yeah.
mean, it's straight action thriller. Um, it starts out, we're following this gentleman named Randall Crane, who's this, he's getting on in years. He's a professor of Russian history and literature, and he gets called he gets called upon to join sort of this task force to go to
Mm-hmm.
Moscow
Yeah.
uh, for this meeting. And once he gets there, things just fall apart. I mean, he's assigned this team of hard-edged, hard-nosed mercenaries who are there with him.
All right.
And it's not that big a spoiler to say they get wiped out by the troubles that immediately befall them. And
Yeah.
Randall's left on his own to kind of this sort of doddering, quirky older gentleman is left on his own to to face these challenges. And you quickly find out he has a history in Russia.
Yep.
He has a particular set of skills, and he is he's definitely up
Yeah.
to the challenge.
That
And
caught me by surprise, by the way.
well, that was the hope in the first issue, is that
Yeah.
will people know what's happening right away, right? So I think we tried to keep that under wraps as best we could. It's
Yeah.
it's a little it's a little difficult with comics, but yeah, he has these, he's definitely capable,
Yeah.
but he also has all these, he has a history in Russia, and all of these killers and assassins that he has history with are
Yeah.
coming out of the woodwork to end his life.
Yeah.
So it's following that story of him trying to survive, him trying to save this young woman that he's been connected with,
Yeah.
and trying to get out of Russia while every terrible person in Russia is trying to kill him.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I'm telling you. I think it was this last issue 3. I was like, oh, come on, man. Don't stop there. So I can't wait for issue 4. I think issue 4 comes out in a week and a half, is it?
I'm not sure when the release date is. I think the final order cutoff is coming up real quick. Like I
Okay.
think depending on when this airs, the
Hmm.
final order order cutoff for that issue is within the next few days. So you need to tell your comic shop you want it. If you haven't read the first few issues, they should, hopefully they have some on the shelf or they can get a hold of them somewhere. But yeah, the final order cutoff is coming up in a few days, and then that would mean the fourth issue comes out in a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah. No, if you haven't read it, you got to jump on this. It's been pretty amazing and a lot of fun to read. I'm hoping that this is the first of another 4-part series, hopefully in the next year or so, because it's been really exciting. And when you look at like comic books that could be adapted for like TV or movies, I would think Red Zone would be one of them. Just because the way it's written, it's just a lot of fun. I would love to see it on the screen.
It was a fun book. Like I said, it was a weird book for me because when I first started working on it, first started outlining it, it was very real world. I mean, this is our world, and I just couldn't help myself though. There's definitely some weird characters in here, and I kind of embraced some James Bond in it. In terms of some of the villains, especially the Roger Moore era of James Bond, where you could really get into some strange characters. So there's some oddball characters in here that kind of push the weirdness factor a little bit. But it's a comic, I needed some of that. Why not?
I thought it fit nice. I thought it fit nice. Yeah, there's definitely one character for sure that I was surprised was in it, and it made it a lot of fun.
I think it's fun. I mean, you can get it. You get the idea real quick. The second issue, I believe, the cover has this robotic hand coming down, pulling a set of dentures out of a glass of water. And exactly. And I was like, that sums this series up.
Yeah, for sure. No, that was a lot of fun and a great joy to read. And I can't wait for issue 4 to come out and to see how that ends and see if it doesn't leave a little bit of an opening for another 4-part series down the road.
Well, that depends if Randall survives or not.
Exactly. Yeah. We're hoping he does. I hope he does. If not, what is it? Is it Nika?
Nika.
Yeah.
Nika is his companion in the series. She has some secrets of her own, so nice. some interesting things with her as well. But who says she survives? I don't, no one. I might have been in a really bad mood at the 4th issue, and just everyone's
gone. Well, that would be very similar to the first issue when everyone but Randall was gone. Right. So I guess it would end the way it began, right? It'd be good book endings for that.
I need like a variant, there's variant covers. I need a variant interior. Here's the everybody dies variant.
Yeah, exactly. That would be a lot of fun, actually. You might be onto something, to be honest, on that.
If I can sell a publisher on the idea of variant interiors, I will have accomplished something.
I think that would be pretty cool, to be honest, right? You could pick the variant that you want to roll with it, or you can end it there and see all the mayhem that took place in the ending of the comic. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Comic readers love to curate their own stories. That's why some read, when they get into Batman, that, well, I only read this series of Batman, and that's all that counts. So I think it'd be kind of nice. On the cover, you could even have like little scales, like the happiness to sadness scale or something.
There you go,
or violence to kindness scale or something, that they could just curate their variant interiors and get the story they want.
Yeah, I have 4 kids. They're all adults now, but I remember buying books for them, and there was a series of kids' books where you could read like, it'd be a 100-page book and you read through the first 80, but then you could pick which way you wanted to go for the last 10 pages. And it was a lot of fun. They really liked it. I can't remember what it was called, but I'll have to look it up. But yeah, it's been done before.
It's like a choose your own adventure, but
exactly,
like 1 or 2 choices at the end. I like that.
Yeah. I think Red Zone would be perfect for that.
Yeah, I do too. From your mouth to AWA's ears.
There you go. If you're listening, AWA, I think we're onto something here. Well, you got a lot going on. I certainly wanted to touch on Red Zone, but if it's okay, I mean, you got a lot of other things going on too. Door to Door, Night by Night. That's a pretty fun read as well. You want to tell us a little bit more about this one? I really enjoyed this one as well.
Door to Door, Night by Night definitely is probably more than Red Zone takes place in a horror centric world.
Yeah.
And it's a horror comedy. It's about a door-to-door sales team in the 80s.
Yeah.
Every town they explore, or every town they reach, they encounter some horrible monster, and they kind of become these. And this is a group of this door-to-door sales team. They are not they're not hero material. You know,
Right.
they're burnouts and drunks and addicts,
Yeah.
and but they're thrown into this sort of role of fighting monsters every issue, and at the same time, obviously dealing with their own internal monsters. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a you know, every issue there, almost every issue is a self-contained story that
Hmm.
there's some threads that go through and there's some character arcs that go through.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fun book. It draws a lot upon, when I was a younger person, I did door-to-door sales,
Hmm.
so I draw a lot of from that experience, and the people that I worked with in door-to-door sales.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a fun book for me. um it's drawn by Sally Cantorino, and she's great. She has such a great style for this kind of story, and has we and when we say monster hunting, we're not really talking about vampires and werewolves. There's a bunch of
Right.
weird creatures in this book. Every
Very,
issue
very
a
much so.
weird monster. Yeah.
Yeah. But you find yourself really connecting with certain characters, and kind of pulling for them as well because of, right, you have the outward monsters, but like you said, there's these inward monsters too, and you start to find out more and more about these monsters that they're battling as they're battling these physical monsters together. And I think you can make a lot of connections, right, if you're starting to spend some time concentrating on the actual characters as opposed to the monsters that they're fighting. And I think that is very relatable for I think a lot of readers, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in a book like this that that I make those connections, because
Mm-hmm.
that's, yes, it's a humor book, but I also want to
Mm-hmm.
scare readers a little bit, and
Yeah.
scares in a book like this come from connecting with the characters and worrying if they're going to pull through, if they're going to make it to the end, if something terrible is going to happen to them.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, that's another one. I think you're on what, issue 5, if I'm not mistaken, or
I think
4.
yeah, I think issue 5, yeah, 5 just came
Just
out.
came out. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
it'll be
then
collected in trade soon.
I'm sorry, Colin.
It'll be collected in a trade paperback within the next month or two, I think.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And then Ghost Lore. So I was lucky enough by working with Comic Crusaders, I was able to get an early release of that and dug into it. I really enjoyed that. I mean, it follows a family. There's the Reverend, his wife, and then the 2 kids. And like any family, right, there's little internal issues. I got 4 kids. There's all kinds of things always going on that you're trying to deal with while you're trying to manage your professional life, while you're trying to manage your family, while you're trying to come together. One person's not talking, the other one's involved in other things they probably shouldn't be in. So there's this worry as a parent going around constantly. But then it takes a crazy turn like the last few pages. That was another fun read.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to do a number of these books that are different for hopefully different for readers,
Yeah.
but definitely I want to do some things that are different for me, and I have to approach them different. Red Zone, for instance,
Yeah.
action thriller, so it's a different kind of challenge,
Right.
because part of the fun for me is trying to figure out these is to challenge myself to do different things, figure out if I can do these stories. Door to door is different because of the humor aspect and sort of the single issues. And then Ghost Lore is a very different kind of book, because it's got the A story, which is the story of this family.
Yep.
um and what happens to them is, after an accident, the members of this family can see and communicate with ghosts,
Yeah.
and these ghosts want to tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
So every issue, we have a different creative team comes in, and we tell one of the stories.
Yeah.
The conceit of the book was always, what ghost stories would ghosts tell? So
Yeah.
these are the stories the ghosts tell. So for every issue, for 5 pages, bam, here's a new creative team, or a new artistic team, and a new, a different kind of story that the ghosts are telling. and wrapped around that is the A story that's also telling this story that's getting bigger and bigger and more epic as it goes along. So it's a challenge to write because the epic story, there's a lot going on. It's an epic story. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes to some big dark places, and we really dig in with this family. And then a 5-page ghost story, that's a challenge to write. Pages is short.
Yeah.
So I'm using, very different sort of storytelling techniques in each of these stories, and you're going to see some very different kinds of stories. So it's got a little bit of an anthology vibe, but it's also got this ongoing story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's amazing. If I think it just released last week. So I saw it in my local comic book store this last Wednesday. So if you haven't picked that one up, it sounds like it was already great. Now it sounds like it's going to get even better with these short stories in them, which it kind of ends with not so much a short story told from the perspective of a ghost, but you start to see all these characters toward the end. So there's a lot of, I'm assuming a lot of material over the next few issues that you could utilize because I'm like you said, each of them have their own story that they want to tell, and I can't wait to dig in.
Yeah, it goes to some weird and crazy places.
Yeah, yeah. Then the next one that I just read, it gave me Twilight Zone feel, and that was Lamentation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. It follows, I think her name's Jennifer, if I'm not mistaken, and she's you know, I think an aspiring actress, and she reads an opportunity, right? And she ends up at this building, and it doesn't look like anybody's been in that building for a long time, but she presses forward and she walks in. And then it gets really interesting after that. And it kind of reminded me of old Twilight Zone style TV. Growing up, there was this one Twilight Zone show that I watched, and I had nightmares about it. And I don't know why. It wasn't scary, but it was this guy, and he was driving his car through the mountains, and he stops at a cafe, and everyone in there's just having a cup of coffee. He sits down and has a coffee too, and then he gets up and drives, and now he can't leave, and he's on this road, and he keeps coming back to the cafe, and
Yeah.
it's over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden he ends up sitting down, and then a new person drives in and sits down for a coffee, and then they just keep adding people to this cafe. And I don't know why that scared the heck out of me, but again, it's not the story, but I had this feeling of that when I was reading it.
Well, I know that episode you're talking about too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what the payoff was of it, and I can't. But I feel like what makes that kind of story scary, at least
Yeah.
for me, is all right. Look, you encounter something awful, right? You could fight it,
Yeah.
but and you probably will die. But the one thing you can do is you can try to flee. You can get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And the thing with a story like that is that takes that away from you. You
Yeah.
can't get away. No matter what you do, you end up in the same spot. So you can't, there's no escape.
Yeah.
And I think that sense of not being able to escape speaks to something sort of in the lizard brain. But Jennifer goes into this old theater, and she immediately she walks in and they're like, "I'm here to audition." They said, "You got the part."
Yeah.
And which seems great for her, but the problem is she can't leave the theater. The theater, she's trapped,
Yeah.
and she cannot leave until the play is performed for a certain group of individuals.
Yeah.
And then the story goes from there, and I can see some Twilight Zone to that. It wasn't necessarily my top of mind. I was thinking a lot of like Suspiria or Dario Argento's opera, or even The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that I had in mind as I was working on this. But yeah, it's going to be a 3-issue series. The first one just came out, and they're 3 issues, but they're like 48. They're double-sized issues. They're real meaty issues of this series.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a fun book, especially if you like stories about people not being able to get out of theaters, no matter what they do. And again, it's another one that was a little bit of a challenge because I was really trying to do something that blended the story of Jennifer in the theater with this ongoing play that's kind of building around them, and the play and reality are sort of bleeding together in weird ways. So it is a strange, spooky read.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's going to turn out to be pretty interesting this next issue, because the way that it feels like we laid a really good foundation of this certain situation that Jennifer is stuck in. And I think things are going to get real fast here. That was my sense at the end.
Yeah. It definitely it escalates in sort of big ways over the course of the 3 issues.
Nice, nice. Well, I mean that you're working on a lot of stuff. I wrote down all the different things that you've done over the last 10 to 15 years, and it's
You wrote them all down? Send that to me, because I need
not
to.
all of them, but I got a lot here, from Cold Spots to Darth Maul to, I mean, you've done a lot of different things and very diverse. So I know we've talked a lot about that horror side that you're becoming known for, but you really have, I mean, Sinestro, I mean, you've done a lot of really cool things. And this is probably an unfair question, because it's like maybe picking your favorite child, but is there a couple that you're like, man, this was maybe not my favorite, but one of the funnest things I was able to do?
Oh, see, now that is a different question.
Mm-hmm.
Most fun.
Like, man, I wish I could do that again, because I really enjoyed doing that.
Well, and I have to break it into different things, because
Yeah.
I'm almost exclusively creator owned now. I do a few license things here and
Yeah.
there if it's something that that really speaks to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to turn down a Godzilla. I'm never going to turn down a Godzilla book. And it's funny. And speaking of, since we started talking about with AWA, Axel
Yeah.
Alonso, Axel at AWA, I doubt he remembers this, but he was the editor in chief when I first started working for Marvel as an exclusive writer.
Mm.
And I remember right after I signed the exclusive, I got offered a Godzilla comic at another publisher. I said, "Oh, I've always wanted to write a Godzilla comic." And I reached out to Axel and I was like, "Hey, Axel, man, I know I just signed this exclusive, and but this is a Godzilla book. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think I could maybe we could figure out a way that I could write this?" And his response was something like, he just completely ignored the question. Like, that question does not exist to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
His next question was about Deadpool. It was like, I asked him that, and he's like, "So with this Deadpool book that you're writing for us," um, but yeah, so I'm almost exclusively creator owned now.
Yeah.
But so I have to divide it. If I think about the most fun I had with creator owned, it's probably going to be The Sixth Gun or Harrow County, which are also two of the books I would always refer people to if they are not familiar with my work. Both
Yeah.
of those books were long runs of a series.
Mm-hmm.
They were, we were able to do exactly what we wanted to do with the book and end it exactly where we wanted to end both of those series.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was they were just joys to work on.
Yeah.
If you talk about, books like, for Marvel or DC, I loved writing Sinestro. I'd still be writing Sinestro today if they'd have let me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved writing Uncanny X-Men and Magneto stories. I'd still be writing Uncanny X-Men and Magneto stories if they'd let me.
Yeah.
I loved writing Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The hate mail for that was a lot of fun. The people who were really angry that these characters were getting killed by Deadpool.
It's kind of in the title, though, right?
Look, what am I supposed to do? Not fulfill that promise? I mean, I'm sorry, but
like, if you pick up that title and you're upset that someone died, I feel like it's on you.
Right. But there's something fun, if almost everything I work on, I've found something fun about that book.
Yeah.
There's very few that I really, that I just couldn't find the joy, because I feel like if you get to that point, if you're one of those folks who just hates comics, well, don't do comics, do something else. I guarantee no one wants to read your dreck. So I at least, I want to have fun with what I'm doing, or I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I always, and I'm not saying, well, first of all, look, I write I tell funny book stories for a living.
Yeah.
Not a bad job, so I'm not complaining about the job. It's not always fun though. There are days where it's difficult, where the story's not working the way you want it to, where things just aren't flowing. But there's always that moment. I tell pretend stories for a living, and you got to you remind yourself of that, and you should be able to find something fun in everything you're doing, and the hope is it's all fun.
Yeah.
And even the challenges, even the things the puzzles you have to solve in order to tell these stories are fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so always, there's something fun about almost everything I've done, or at least that I found fun about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes the things I find fun, other people don't. They're like, "Oh, this is the worst. What a terrible person you are." But I still find, I got to find fun in being terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. My kids remind me that all the time.
Yeah,
Things I find funny, they don't find funny at all.
not always,
It's not always right.
and different people, look, I write stories, and I don't expect everyone to love every story.
Yeah.
I'm not a um I'm not a songwriter. I'm not a musician. I can't go out and do the same thing every time every time on stage. I have to do different stories.
Yeah.
So it's not everybody's going to like every different story, but I appreciate the people who give them a try,
Yeah.
and and see what they think.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, I don't know from as a writer, what is more difficult, picking up X-Men, knowing that they have this canon that you have to kind of hold to, right? Obviously, as a writer, you probably have some wiggle room to create a story that you want to create, but you do have a history that you have to kind of respect when you're writing something like that. And then you have your own creations that you're doing right now. Which one is more difficult for you, picking up an X-Men and having to continue, or being able to jump right in and have a story that you've had kind of in your heart that you want to release, but you got to put it on paper?
Well, I can tell you that the creator-owned stuff
Yeah.
always goes faster. I
Okay.
mean, I it's always they write a little more smoothly. The story's kind of, I mean, it's a dumb saying, story writes itself, but in a lot of ways, it feels like the story writes itself.
Yeah.
Uh, Absolutely, there are, you write something like Uncanny X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
You've got or any of the stories for Marvel, DC. You have to, you're kind of, you have the history of the characters that you know some people throw out the window, and some people want to honor the stuff that came before, but tell new stories, which I think is a little more difficult to tell something new but keep the old stuff in mind.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the way I'm wired with those kind
Mm-hmm.
of stories.
Yeah.
Um, but then you also have to balance what what the publishing mandates for those characters are, what editorial mandates for those characters are, what other writers might be doing with those
Mm-hmm.
characters. So it's just there are always many more hurdles to jump through to get a story told in those kind of universes.
Mm-hmm.
um, Sometimes it's easier, and sometimes the editorial and publishing, the stars align, and you actually can do something and kind of run with it. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a lot of you know your plans get destroyed because of some event that's coming down the pipe, or something that someone in a different book is going to do with a character that completely derails what you have planned.
Yeah.
So there are more hurdles for sure in a book that I don't own and control
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there a preference over one and then the other?
Uh, for me, there's no comparison. There's
Yeah.
no comparison. Creator owned is the is where it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I just enjoy that, and I feel like I'm creating my own stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do like I said, if it's a character or property that I just really have that I'm really into, that's fun and it's awesome. And it's one of those, oh man, this is, I get to finally, tell this crazy Godzilla story that's in my head. But I also, maybe I don't, because who knows if, the licensor is going to like what I'm going to suggest. But there are, look, there are licenses. I had a publisher call me on something that I'm going to be working on down the line. And they said, would you be interested in doing this for this property? And I told him, I was like, if you had not offered me this, we would have never worked together again, because I would have been so offended that you didn't offer me this project, because it's perfect for me.
Yeah.
So that, and I don't necessarily chase that stuff anymore. I don't, but if it comes up, I definitely want to, I like participating in those universes. And like I said earlier, I love these characters.
Yeah.
So if DC were to call me and said, "Hey, we sure would like to do another Sinestro," before the words were finished, I'm like, "Yep, I'm in." Or if Marvel called me and said, "Do you want to come back in and tell that Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants story that you pitched to us for, month after month after month after month?" I'm in. I absolutely do.
Yeah.
And that's because I love those characters and I love that, I love that world.
Yeah. Have you had a chance? I didn't see Godzilla on all the things that you've done. Are you still waiting for that phone call?
No. So I wrote a bunch of years back, right after my exclusive with Marvel ended. I did a book called Godzilla Cataclysm with IDW.
Nice.
And then last year I did a crossover that you would think had been done already, which was Godzilla versus the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Yeah.
So we did that last year.
Yeah.
And I'm if you were to look over at my board of pitches and ideas that I've been sending out to people, I just said I don't chase that stuff, but you would definitely see the word Godzilla several times over here on this board.
So the itch hasn't been fully scratched yet.
There's an exception to every rule, right? Yeah. I don't chase it except for all those mentions up here on my board of submissions.
I love it. Well, I'm glad that you had the opportunity. It sounds like there might be more though to it. So I feel like the scratch, the itch is still there a little bit.
There is, and with all these stories,
yeah,
it really matters if I think there's something I can do with those characters or that idea. If I don't think I'm the right guy for a book, like used to be back in the day, nope, if you offer me a book, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And that's not always the right call.
Sure.
It took me a while to learn that. Because I'm not the right guy for every story. Yeah. But so that's someone calls me and says, "Hey, do you want to write?" I don't know. It's weird. I get, I saw there was a Mad Balls comic, out. I'm like, man, how come nobody asked me to write? And why? Why would I want to write Mad? Because I thought Mad Balls were cool when I was a kid. So, but I have to think to myself, do I have a Mad Ball story that's going to matter? That what's my Eisner winning Mad Ball story? That's the kind of stuff I have to consider. Can I contribute to the mythology and tell a story that's interesting? And if the answer is yes, and I think I can have fun doing it, then I might be interested. And that's where, there might be some surprises down the line, things that aren't necessarily what I would consider, this is in my, this is in my wheelhouse. If there's things that I think, man, there's a story I can tell here that might take some people by surprise, might surprise me, but is also going to be fun and interesting, and I have something to say telling that story, then yes, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Incredible. So, we started off, I called you the King of Horror, but you've done so many other things. Are you okay with that, or do you not want to be known for that because you do have a lot of different stories? Like, does that bother you? Because you're really good at it. I mean, it is Cole. I mean, you're really good at that.
No, it doesn't bother me. I like I said earlier, from a branding perspective, I've definitely I've embraced it. I think
Yeah.
my website, when you type it in, it comes up to like Master of Horror Comics or
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
so I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna uh so I'm all in on being a horror guy. It's I'm fine with that. I can tell different kinds of stories and still be a
Yeah.
horror guy.
Yeah.
And really, a lot of times horror elements bleed into whatever I'm working
Sure.
on anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, but uh, but yeah, I'm fine with it. I like it. I like I like being called the master of horror or the king of anything. If
Yeah.
someone's going to call him the
Good
king of
point.
something, sure. Well, yeah, that's me. I'm the king.
Yeah.
Whatever. Hail to the king, baby, and whatever you say. That's me. Whatever they want to call me the king of, I don't care.
Yeah,
The king,
exactly.
the king of My Little Pony comics, sure, that's me.
Sure.
I'm the king of
Why
My
not?
Little Pony. I've never written a My Little Pony comic, but if you want to call me the king, that's fine. I'm the king.
I love it. I love it. Well, Colin, I can't tell you how awesome it's been to meet you and to hear your story. It started off really wanting to cover Red Zone, which is just a fantastic book. If you're listening to this and you haven't picked this up by AWA, you're really missing out. It's a masterpiece, Colin. I really enjoy it a lot.
Thank you. I've been really, that's a book. Um, every book every new issue that comes out, I kind of hold my breath to see what people are going to say.
Yeah.
But Red Zone, I definitely was kind of, oh, this one, here we go, buckle up, because what are people going to say about this thing? Because it was such a departure. Um, but I've been really, really pleased with the reaction to the book. It doesn't hurt that the great Mike Deodato is doing the art
Yeah.
on it.
That's incredible.
I mean, he's such a cinematic artist, and he's
Yeah.
so good. He's so good at action and making the pages. That's a talking head page you're holding up
It's
there, but he
incredible.
does such a great job of the
Yeah.
motion, and
Really so.
conveying a sense
Even
of
the emotion in the eyes and the facial expressions. I mean, yeah, Mike just did a bang up job throughout this comic. It's incredible.
Yeah, so I was nervous when it came out, but I've been very pleased with the way people have reacted to it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad folks are enjoying it, because it was a fun, it was a fun book. It definitely, when I got into the second and third issue, I was like, are people going to follow me along on this? If I,
Yeah.
is this taking things a step too far? Is it getting too weird here? No.
No, I
Let's
don't
keep let's see what happens.
I don't think so. Yeah, no, it's been really good. And like I said, issue 4 in a couple of weeks. Can't wait to see how this ends. And fingers crossed that it'll end in a way that hopefully there's some more, because it's been really enjoyable. It's nonstop action, by the way, just nonstop. You get through the first few pages as that foundation is laid, and then it's just nonstop through
Yeah.
all 3 issues. It's incredible.
Yeah, we put our foot down on the accelerator with
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
I knew going into it, again, Mike has such a talent for action.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's a bit of martial arts in this,
Yeah.
and and I've studied martial arts a little bit,
Uh-huh.
uh, but Mike, I mean, he's like a martial arts master. So writing that, I was like, all right, Mike, this is what he does. He kicks him in this way,
Yeah.
but you do it the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Draw it the way it's supposed to be done for someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's fun too, because that guy, I mean, he doesn't mess around.
Yeah.
He's not an armchair take martial arts because your son is taking martial arts,
Yeah.
something to talk about. This guy is like into it.
Legit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Legit. Yeah. Yeah. The last question I ask everybody this: what do you think the current situation in comics is? Do you think it's super positive and we have a lot to look forward to? Do you think there needs to be some major changes? How do you see the comic industry as a whole?
Wow. Hey, let's go out on a light note, man. Um,
So
look,
I have an opinion. I'll share it after, but I would love to know yours.
uh, so I feel like story wise, we have it is so positive. There are so many stories out there. There's so much potential for stories. On the creator-owned front, I think you are seeing stories that I think there's so many publishers doing so many cool stories. And it doesn't matter what kind of story you're into.
Yeah.
There's a comic for you.
I agree.
And I think it's exciting on then we get into self-publishing and crowdfunding and stuff like that. And I think that's exciting as well. Um, do I think I'm a little worried in terms of how comics are doing in terms of getting them in the hands of readers and attracting new readers. I make no as I was telling you before this started, I think the concept of marketing comics is exceptionally difficult. And probably the only other thing in comics that's more difficult is running a comic book shop and staying afloat as a comic book shop. I think that's a huge challenge. And I'm always going to say, I've always been trying to figure out, how do you make that? What do we do? How do we make it easier for comic book, publishers, marketers, creators, but the retailers too? How do we make it easier for them to get as many comics as possible into the hands of as many readers as possible? And I think we're in a challenging time right now. And I think, there are challenges that we're facing in terms of, AI. And I threw up in my mouth just a little bit.
Listening to you say that, it's a little scary.
I mean, so I think there's challenges with that. I think there are still weird perceptions in comics about what's an important comic and what's not. And look, I think it's an individual decision what's important to you.
Sure.
And if you like superhero comics, go forward. But it's difficult when you're doing creator-owned books and some people just kind of blow that off because it doesn't have a guy in spandex in it. That's a little, I think there's the challenge, is getting that crossover appeal, because I think there are books, if you love action superhero books, Red Zone's for you too.
Absolutely.
Red Zone there is a robot hand picking dentures up out of the glass. Come on.
Exactly.
How much more superhero adjacent can you get? So it's just a matter of, I think that's the thing, is getting more books into the hands of more people and figuring out how to do that. There's never going to be a time that I wouldn't say there are difficulties in comics and things that need to be addressed. And, how creators are, everything from how, creators are treated to getting new creators into the thing and representing different voices. There's always going to be work to do on that front. But for me right now, I'm going to say, I think from a types of stories and the kinds of stories and the wealth, it's a comedy of riches. There's just so much out there that are great books but in some cases nobody's reading them. And there's the, getting people to read those books, and it's tough for me to say, my local comic shop closed down a couple of years ago and I've been so angry about it. I don't go to, I don't have a local comic shop anymore. So I go to, I have to go when I go do signings and things like that. That's when I go to my, to new comic shops, but I don't have one now because mine here in my town closed, and it made me mad and bitter.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. On one side, right, there is worry, but we've gone through this. I mean, you remember the 90s and the crash, right? We've gone through ups and downs constantly, but I think independent comics right now, the stories that are being told, it might be the richest time in comics, because one, although it's not cheap, it's the availability and the opportunity to bring your story to paper is easier today than it was 5 years ago, and so on and so forth, right? And you're seeing, like you said, through crowdfunding, all kinds of people bringing stories, and I think that is amazing. To your point, I think the hard part is getting people to try it out. But man, I'm telling you, the indie scene is rich right now with stories. And if they could get people to read them, I think they'll get caught because they're incredible.
Yeah, and it is definitely getting eyes on getting people to read them. But it's the only, to me, the biggest drawback of there being so many things
Yeah. Yeah,
is there's so much. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle. I
for
mean,
sure.
I back, for instance, on Kickstarter, I back a ton of Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, it's a sickness with me. Everything from, comics to role playing games to
Yeah.
board games to shoes to backpacks.
Yeah.
I back all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I still miss things. I was just talking to someone yesterday and I was like, this is one of the coolest books I've ever seen. And they're like, well, we ran a Kickstarter for it.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to miss. It's easy to miss things
Yeah.
because there's so much. And that's a challenge, for someone who's trying to break in and maybe doing their own comic or creating their own things, which is, I think, a great way to break into comics, no matter what you want to do, what your goal is.
Yeah.
Um, but that challenge is real. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle, and you got to find the things that will get attention and set you apart. And those things aren't necessarily a gimmick.
Yeah.
It's you got to find the heart and soul
Hmm.
that's gonna connect with someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate your honest answer, Colin. But I do think independent is has the potential to be very strong. And I'm hoping that that comes to fruition because, man, I love it. AWA is just pumping out all kinds of amazing stuff, and Red Zone is one of them. And I'm really, really excited about this book. Can't wait for issue 4 to come out to complete this 4-part series and see what you're coming out with next.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to see what people think of the end. We'll see if those characters make it through, and their potential for more beyond that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm hoping I could read that and go, oh, thank you, Colin. I don't want to be upset, Colin. Oh,
Well, I
don't
don't want to
hurt my
upset
heart, man. Don't
anybody.
hurt my heart. Don't hurt my heart, man. I love it.
I can't promise. I
All
can't
right,
promise
sounds
anything.
good. That's what you should say. That's what you should say. Well, Colin, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to end with that people need to know what you're working on, where you're going to be in the next few weeks, any of those type of things, any
Well,
cons coming up.
yeah. I'm not doing as many big Comic Cons this year, but I am doing Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's just in a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm doing a convention next week in Texas, but it's the first convention I've done in 20 years that I'm just doing for fun. I'm
Oh,
not
cool.
doing I'm not doing I'm just going. It's a horror convention, but I'm just going just to remind myself what I love,
Yeah,
and reconnect in sort of a uh, and I'm going with friends. We're going to just hang out and have a great time, and I haven't done that
yeah.
in decades. So I'm
That's awesome.
doing that. But then back to the grind of it. I'll be at Heroes Con in a couple of weeks. That's always a great show if you're anywhere within driving distance. It's an amazing creator focused show that's just always a lot of fun. Um, if you want to keep up with me, I have a website, cullenbunn.com, and from that website you can subscribe to my newsletter. I do a weekly newsletter that I put, I probably it's probably too much information sometimes because I put a lot of what I'm really thinking about, what I'm working on, how
Yeah,
things are going, what I think the direction I think things are going. And sometimes it's just me moaning and bemoaning my fate.
yeah.
But I think it's a fun newsletter that people really like, and it comes out every Sunday. That's a great way to keep track of what's coming out, what I'm working on, hints of things that are coming down the line,
Nice.
and everywhere I'll be, everything like that. So all of that you can get to from cullenbunn.com.
Nice, nice. Well, Colin, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And man, I wish you nothing but the best. Hope we could do this again soon. Once some newer stuff comes out, I would love to have you back and we could talk about that too, maybe.
Yeah, you bet. You just you know where to find me.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it and have a great week.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Appreciate it.